I guess I'm going to want to go back to a quick question before I maybe move on to some different topics, but we talked about thirst. In your opinion, maybe obviously this is going to be context dependent, but thirst, a lot of people will say thirst isn't an adequate, stimulus. You need to drink before you're thirsty. What's kind of the consensus on that, or maybe your opinion on that? I know we talked about the clinical
Yeah.
versus the sports medicine may determine that, but I mean, in general, what if we talk about it from a performance versus just we'll call it a normal person. I mean, during the day, obviously people are high performing athletes need to think about dehydration or hydration in a different way, but most people are exercising maybe 30 minutes a day, probably not even every day. And so for most people, is thirst going to be an adequate stimulus for when they need to drink?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the app within your brain that's, is governed by your cranial nerve system that connects to your kidney. I mean, what better signal than you have that's actually monitoring your blood in real time. So that, I mean, to me, that's the goal for me for most cases. And average, I mean, that's the goal. That's all you need. And I get a lot of like, well, my thirst doesn't work. I never get thirsty. I'm like, yeah, but they're the ones that they're just like, at the, they got the water bottle at the desk and they're always drinking. It's like, well, you never got there. I put you on the lab and put it at like 90 degrees and I make you on the treadmill. You're going to be thirsty and you're going to know what that feels like. But people who say they don't have their thirst doesn't work because they never get to that point. So I think in the wide scan, and again, to my corollary is like, for me is like, how are you not going to die? Thirst is going to save you from both ends. Thirst is going to save you from cellular dehydration and it's going to save you from hyponatremia. And that's my perspective. I'm not the little nuance, performance where, you can go into that hole. But for the regular person, like we're talking about, yeah, that's going to protect you from dying from both extremes of dysnatremia.
Yeah, I think we don't give our body enough credit sometimes in terms of, what it's capable of doing and telling us really what it needs. And again, I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about most people sort of rely on the recommendations rather than the signals from their own body, whether it's regards to eating or drinking. Most people will not necessarily rely on their hunger, but rather the recommendation, oh, you need to eat 3 meals a day or, eat every couple hours and prevent yourself from being hungry to stoke your metabolism, whatever. But same thing with hydration. And that maybe brings us to like everybody needs to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Where did that come from in terms of that recommendation? I'm sure it just came from, an unpublished study, like many of the things that we've been talking about, but do you know sort of the origin of the 8 glasses a day?
This is so people have looked at this. Scientists have looked at like where it came from, and nobody really knows where that came from. But they hypothesized that there's, even in 1945, and the nutrition board was like, you needed 2 liters, which is like eight glasses of water. That's the average intake, and it's based on the caloric expenditure of like, so every like gram of water for every calorie that you burn. So again, the 2 liters came from foods. It came from like everything that you ate and every different beverage that you took in. It didn't say that you had to have 8 glasses in addition to everything else, because there's a lot of fluid in everything that we eat. Some animals don't even have to drink anything because they get all the water they need from foods, particularly the desert ones. So again, the theory is that, okay, a lot of data have shown that most people on average, the 70-kilogram male doing 30 minutes of exercise in a temperate room every day, like the albino rat, needs 2 liters. And the women, if you're 56 kilograms, you're somewhere close to that as well. But somehow that got morphed into, and we think it's marketing, that you need in addition of the 8 glasses of water. So, somewhere in there was a marketing ad, which has no peer review. You can say whatever you want and say it's healthy versus like the 2 liters came from fluids, but that was the fluids of the beer and the coffee and the soups and the smoothies that we eat. So that's what it got morphed in there. But again, to my counter argument is like, give me a number. Everyone wants like this number. That assumes we're all white albino rats in the same conditions doing the exact same thing every day. And we're all different. You know, we're all unique in this diversity. We're diverse. And so again, to even in us in a different day, we will require a different amount of water depending on what we do. So, you know, it doesn't apply to everybody. And how can you even think that one recommendation would be like good for all? Because we're not all the same. And that's my counteract. But that's where it came from. It came from like, you need fluid. And they're like, oh, no, it's water. This was interesting too. So if they actually looked at the drinking water, and this came from like the USDA, what they found was the higher the income, the more bottled water they drink too. I mean, it comes out of a tap, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So